Hello and welcome to the Alpha Edge Podcast, the show for men over 50 who refuse to fade out, slow down, play small, or settle for average. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert, coach, and founder of the Alpha Edge, and I am here to help you get and stay strong in every dimension of your life, physically, mentally, emotionally, morally, and spiritually. You're here because you're ready to reclaim your power, to own your masculinity, and lead your life with strength and purpose. If you're ready to sharpen your edge, revive your drive, and lead like a man who's built for more, you're in the right place. All right, men, let's get after it. Coach Russell, welcome to the very first episode of the Alpha Edge Podcast, man. How's it going?
It's going great. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited for this project. So folks that don't know, Russell and I are both coaches in a company called The Silver Edge. That's a company I founded, I guess, about 5 years ago or so. And what we want to do in this podcast is talk about the things that a man might do to get and stay strong and to help dudes, specifically guys, just older guys, right? Us men in our 50s, 60s, even 70s, to help us get and stay strong and to step into our authentic masculinity. In these episodes, I want to explore the intersection of modern culture and masculinity. I think there's a lot to unpack there, but mostly I just want to talk about practical things that dudes over 50 would be interested in when it comes to, again, being masculine men, being healthy men, showing up as their best, most authentic masculine selves. And hopefully that's what we can deliver in this podcast. Now, before we get started, I want to let you know that we have a free guide. It's titled How to Raise Your Testosterone Naturally. This is, again, it's a free guide. It's 26 pages, chock full of ways to naturally raise your testosterone. So if you're a guy over 50 listening to this, definitely check that out. You can find the download link in the show notes for this episode on whatever app you're listening on. So guys, make sure you check that out. All right, Russell, let's kick this thing off. I think a good way for us to start here is maybe just tell folks a little bit about ourselves, right? Just do a quick introduction, and then we're going to talk about what it means to be strong, holistically strong, I think, for the rest of this episode. But why don't you kick us off, buddy? Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up in the fitness space? And kick us off, man.
All right. Thank you. I've always been into fitness, into some aspect of it. I was in the military, served 8 years in the U.S. Coast Guard. After that, I went to law enforcement, was a cop for about 18 years. So both of those jobs require you to stay fit, but never really taught you how to do it in the job. So I was one of those ones that just sought out anything on, well, at that time it wasn't online, right? It was magazines, right? It was Men's Health or Men's Fitness, things of that nature. So I just followed some silly diets that were there and just thought it would work for me. And, you know, eventually, of course, like anything, you start off with one thing, it works for a short period of time and then it fizzles out. So that's what happened over and over again. So I did my yo-yo dieting and whatnot. And it wasn't until I hired a coach. He was actually a bodybuilding coach. I didn't want to be a bodybuilder, but I just needed some guidance on some things. And I really enjoyed that relationship with a coach. Saw some great results, and which led me to pursue, I thought that would be a fun thing to do, a fun job. I was still a cop, so I was on my twilight of my career, and I was going to do something totally different. But you know, I was actually going to go and continue with law enforcement in some aspect. But this coaching thing just kind of got a hold of me, and I got some certs, worked with a bunch of people for free. Eventually, got hired on as assistant coach. Met you through one of our nutritional certs, and started working with you. And so it's been a fun journey. It's something I never thought I would be able to would do. And I think being a first responder, I always thought I would be helping people and never really felt like I ever did. And it wasn't until I got into coaching I really felt like I was helping people. So it's been a fun time, and it's fun explaining my experiences with fitness, and of course a lot of missteps and and some victories, right? So it's a fun journey.
Yeah, and it is a journey, right? It's not like you would tell somebody you've arrived, right? You're at the pinnacle of optimal health or strength or any of that, right? It's a journey.
It's always like I was taught when I was a cop, you'll never stop learning. You could be 30 years in and still learning. And I think the same with with fitness and health, right? There's always something new or
Yeah.
something coming out. And then on a side note, I'm a single dad of two boys, 12 and 15. I am a full-time dad. I have the kids full-time, and I've had them like that ever since separation for about 7-8 years. So that's been another journey. So I specialize,
Yeah.
I specialize with very busy parents.
I bet. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. All right. Well, yeah, I love that story. I love the idea of this trial and error and self experimentation. Well, this didn't work and this didn't work, but not giving up, right? That perseverance of keeping after it. I've got a kind of a similar backstory. I suspect most of us that end up where this is our career in fitness, nutrition, strength training, etc. Something led us here usually. For me, back in my 30s, I was an endurance guy. So that was the first time in my life I'd ever been really active. One of my brothers talked me into doing a marathon. I did my first marathon, was immediately hooked, ended up doing a bunch of marathons. And that led over into doing a bunch of triathlons, and somewhere in my probably, I don't know, early 40s, I just quit cold turkey. I just stopped. I wasn't, but I was still eating and drinking as if I were, going out for runs and bike rides and swimming every single day. And so you can imagine what happened. I just got in really bad shape in my mid to late 40s. At one point, I just crashed and burned. I ended up, thought I was having a heart attack. I wasn't, but spent 3 days in a hospital, really, really poor health. I was as fat, sick, and out of shape as I'd ever been in my life. I was pathetically weak, undermuscled, and that really lit a fire underneath me. So that kind of started at the time. I had a corporate career in tech sales. I was actually very good at it, very successful. So from the outside looking in, things looked pretty good, but I was I was slowly falling apart there with that lifestyle. And that kind of sent me on this quest to be not sick. I don't want to be the dude who dropped dead at 40 something from a heart attack. So I went back to what my doctor, my general practitioner, after I got out of the hospital, said, "Hey, Kev, you need to eat less and move more." That was basically his prescription for me. And really, it turns out that was really bad advice. I ended up going back to what I knew when it came to move more, which was I just laced up the tennis shoes and started running. So I was running all the damn time, and I was trying to eat less and less and less. And I was avoiding things like meat because I was, I didn't want to have cholesterol, and a lot of self-experimentation. I actually went completely 100% plant-based for a while I was running all these miles. You can imagine what that did to my physique. Nothing very phenomenal happening there. Got very unspectacular results, shall we say. Didn't really, maybe I got a little bit healthier, but not appreciably healthier. And I tell you what, it was a podcast that saved my life. I really think that, or really transformed my life at any rate. I had found podcasts, it was probably 10, 15 years ago, something like that. And I don't remember what podcast it was, but there was this dude, Dr. Jonathan Sullivan, on there. He'd written a book called The Barbell Prescription. I think it's like strength training for men over 40 or something. And he was making this very compelling case of why, especially older people over 40, should strength train, like with a barbell, like squat, deadlift, and bench press kind of strength train. And not just to get strong per se, but because it was the way to healthy aging. It was the way to improved and increased sustainable metabolic health. And I'd never really heard that message before. And I'd never been in a gym before in my life. I don't think I'd ever touched a barbell before then. So that led me then to stop all that damn running, walk into a Globo gym for the first time ever, just completely just overwhelmed and terrified, really. I was very insecure because I was chubby. I had a beer belly, man boobs, ridiculously under muscled. But like you, eventually I hired a coach, and the coach wrote me a program, and then I started looking at what I was eating. Long story short is I am where I am today, right? I do this full time. I've got a business called the Silver Edge, where we work exclusively with men and women in their 50s and 60s to help them age like strong badasses. And of course, that project led me to meet you, and you and I've got together. We've now got a men's group called the Alpha Edge, and we're, I don't know, what are we, 3 months into that project, something like that. And we decided, you know what, this project needs a podcast to support it. So that's why we're here, right? Russell and I are both really invested in what it takes to optimize your health, and specifically to this audience, men's health, and specifically to the mature man's health, right? It's not really all that difficult to be a strong, healthy, ripped badass when you're in your 20s. It's a different story when you're in your 50s, 60s, maybe even your 70s, right? All right, so Russell, I thought we would kick off today by just talking about what it means to be a strong man. What does that look like? How does one go about getting strong. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of pull this apart. Now, we've talked about this in our Alpha Edge group, but we talk about being holistically strong, what it means to be a strong man. And we've got these 5 pillars. We've got physical strength, mental strength, emotional strength, moral strength, and spiritual strength. So I thought it might be kind of fun to talk about each one of these, pull them apart just for a couple of minutes and give the listener an idea what we mean when we say a strong man. I'm just going to start by something that I had prepared for when we discussed this in our group a while back. And it's this: if you neglect your physical strength, your body's going to decline. Mm-hmm. If you neglect your mental strength, you quit when things get tough. If you neglect your emotional strength, you let feelings dictate your actions. And if you neglect moral strength, you compromise on your values. And if you neglect your spiritual strength, you're going to lack purpose and dedication. So there's our foundation here. So Russell, let's start with the bedrock of strength, and that's going to be physical strength. What do you say to a guy? I know you coach many dudes, help them get strong, lose fat, all that good stuff. What are we looking for? What are we talking about when we're saying physical strength for a guy?
I mean, flat out just building muscle.
Flat out building muscle.
Yeah,
amen, brother.
A lot of us don't have it. Like you said, you come from a sales career, right? That is, would you say computer sales or software sales?
Yeah, tech sales.
Tech sales. That didn't exist when your grandfather was around, and so times like.
And I'll tell you this, it did not require physical strength.
No. Right? Even being a cop didn't require physical strength. Like, we were taught to run and condition. There was no physical strength markers. So, even that extent, and it's funny, if you ever shaken your grandfather's hand, it was like shaking a rock, and
yeah, that's right.
His 60s and above when he, and it wasn't because he was in the gym. It's because he had a physical job, which required.
He was swinging a hammer or turning a wrench or,
so
doing some kind of manual labor, made him physically strong.
We've lost that with all the comforts that we have. And now we have to, replace it with gym time, with building muscle, with lifting weights.
You're 100% right. We're actually manufacturing work, aren't we? When we talk about the gym.
Yeah.
But for most of us in this day and age, if we don't have that physical job that has these physical manual labor type requirements, the gym is the next best place for us to get strong, to practice doing some of these functional real world movements. And, I tell guys that when we talk about this, even when we're talking about holistic strength, right? This across all these dimensions, your body's your foundation. Your physical body is the foundation. And if you don't have the discipline and the tools to train it, you're going to struggle in all these other areas, right?
Yes.
And strength training it's about muscles, but it's about more than that. It's about building resilience. It's about building longevity. It's about injury proofing your body, right? It's about having this strong body that supports a strong mind, because pushing through hard training it helps rewire the body and the mind for just toughness, just being tough. And I think in this day and age that masculine quantity of discipline and toughness and doing hard things is just lost a little bit, right? Yeah. And we can learn those lessons certainly in the gym. Is that fair?
Yeah, 100%. And then, just be careful what you think strength training is. We've talked about this time and time again. It's usually a hard topic to get through. A lot of clients is, strength training is progressively overloading and rest, that's the main component of it. And a lot of it, we think of just a lot of these like boot camp classes or things like that's not going to get you the strength that you need.
That's a good point. In fact, I tell you what, for our next episode, I'm gonna write that down. That's what we're gonna talk about next time. Absolutely, we're gonna talk about strength training, what it is, and the best way to do it for a dude over 50 to get strong, to get physical, to work on this dimension of physical strength. Love it, absolutely love it. Yeah. All right. So physical, I think most of you dudes can appreciate you should be strong. You should be working to get and stay strong in that physical realm. Next up, I want to talk about mental strength. I feel like in this day and age, again, our culture supports weak men just folding under pressure, not pushing back, but strong men push through that adversity, right? If we train our mind like our body, we do hard things and we challenge ourselves, we stay disciplined, and when things go wrong, and things will 100% go wrong, we adapt and we overcome as opposed to making excuses and quitting. Russell, what do you personally do to kind of stay sharp in this mental strength game? Are there things that you've learned along the way to help you stay mentally strong?
It kind of goes back to, I guess, childhood, right? We lose that sense of keeping almost like a routine and a schedule. And I think it's because of a lot of like modern conveniences, right? So technically, I don't have to cook today, right? I don't have to cook for 10 weeks in a row. I could DoorDash my
Yeah.
face off and get the food I need. Whereas when I was a kid, there were a handful of fast food. I think McDonald's and Burger King might have been the fast food restaurants, right? There wasn't much else. And then
Yeah.
there was no DoorDash or anything. So if mom was at home, mom didn't cook, you were kind of screwed, right? You're going to eat
Yeah.
something out of the cupboard all day. And we lost that because the more and more people I talk to, that's the number one thing they lose is that discipline of, hey, I got to do something to sustain the way I'm living. I think that's a big thing, right? Because we lost it because we have the convenience of not being able to do it, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Funny
We
thing, I
live.
watch these
Yeah.
Alaska shows, and it stresses
Hmm.
me out because they're like approaching winter, and they're like, I have to get enough elk for the winter, and I'm thinking to myself, God, how much elk
Yeah.
do you have to have for 8 months? And I try to calculate
Yeah.
what I need next week from the grocery store. Never mind 8 months down the
Right.
road.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And there's real consequences to not having
yeah,
it,
you don't
right?
have it. You're
Yeah. You better have your elk and your firewood chopped, right? Or
or you're
or
or
else.
you're done. Yeah, and we lost
Yeah.
that, and we just let. I think that we just let that slide in a lot of things. Same thing with same thing with the gym and those responsibilities. We keep every other responsibility except for keeping us healthy, which I find is kind of
Yeah.
odd too, right? I
Hmm.
have had a call with a client one time where he was talking about how he can't meal prep, and then he said, hold on, I have to go to the stove real quick. And I said, stove? So he gets off the video. He comes back, and I said, oh, what are you cooking? And he goes, oh, it's food for our dogs. And I just I
He's
just
meal prepping for his
I
dogs.
just slumped my head
Yeah.
on the
Come on,
computer,
man.
and I was like, sir, come on.
Right.
And he laughed. He was like,
Yeah.
all right, I understand how ridiculous this sounds.
Yes. Yeah.
So
You're food prepping for your dog, not yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I, I think when it comes to mental strength, you're spot on with the comments there about convenience. It just culture makes things so easy for us not to be strong, and we're not encouraged to step up and to be strong and to push through adversity. It's really easy to back out. I don't feel like you said, we don't have to do a lot. I mean, I don't have to go out and hunt elk because winter's coming. I just don't. I don't need to split enough wood to get me through. I don't need to build my shelter. We've got all these modern conveniences. Nothing wrong with that, right? But for the bulk of human existence, we weren't going to live to pass on our our genes if we didn't find mental strength somewhere, right? Yeah. All right. So along with mental strength, I'm going to talk a little bit about emotional strength because they're definitely, I think this is an area that's interesting when we talk specifically to men about masculinity. And I don't think that being emotionally strong means being emotionless, but it does mean being in control of your emotions. I think weak men let fear, anxiety, anger dictate their actions. And I think strong men acknowledge their emotions, but they act based on their principles and their values, not their feelings. And man, Russell, do we live in a day where feelings seem to be ruling ruling everything? It's almost like feelings are more important than facts, or feelings are more important than being emotionally strong. And again, not saying just be this unfeeling robot, but understanding that we want our actions as men to be guided by our values and our principles and not on feelings. Do you see that in the world around you today? Kind of more and more men being led by feelings as opposed to conviction?
Yes, 100%. I mean, you just nailed it right there.
Yeah.
And then the accountability too kind of goes out the door with that,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, blaming everybody or everything else for what our problems are. I mean, you and I could probably do that
Yeah.
right now if we wanted to, just blame
Yep.
other people for what what we haven't done. I think as a man, it's hard to, because, we're beat down for so long of not being emotions and
Right.
things of that nature. But I think we show our emotions in different ways, right? We show our love in different ways than women do. I definitely agree with that. I think that, things I do to show love to my children, to my girlfriend, is different than way she would show love to me.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with society too, with, split households. I struggled with that for years because, again, I was a single dad. I had sole responsibility for the children, and almost then I had to play a dual role. I couldn't be a total
Right.
dad 100% of the time. So now I have
You're
a little
trying to
bit
take
of
on the dad and the mom role.
yeah, I
Yeah.
have a little bit
Yeah.
of a healthy balance. My kids come to me for emotional support too. So I kind of had to learn how to turn it on and turn it off when I needed to, which is it's really difficult because sometimes I just want to
Yeah.
smack them upside the head when they need a hug sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Got it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that I don't know if we're making a turn back. I've seen more masculinity stuff around, but then again, I think it's like I don't know about you, Kevin, but I think it's like overly stated, right? Like
Yeah, right.
you know
It's
what I
that
mean?
pendulum when it swings so far one way, then the inevitable overcorrection the other way.
It's kind of
I
like
do see that.
politics, right? Like we can't just say, yeah, I understand what the other side is saying. I still support my side, but I understand what the other side is. You'll never hear that anymore, right? It's all like,
No, it's
it's all
more
bad one
divided than
way or
ever.
all good
Yeah.
another way. Yeah.
I like what you said there about responsibility and how it's easy to play the blame game. Hey, I'm a victim of whatever, my past, of culture, of politics, of circumstances, of this other person. And I know inside our group we talk about real men taking radical ownership and responsibility for everything in your life. It's not to say that shitty things haven't happened to you or that shitty things aren't happening to you now or won't happen to you in the future, but that we are in control, that we are responsible for everything in our lives. And that's not a popular sentiment, but I think that falls under that being emotionally strong. Again, acknowledging emotions, but not letting that dictate how we show up in the world, I think is a critical part of being holistically a strong man in today's world. And then related to, again, mental and emotional strength is moral strength, that moral conviction. Are you a man who stands by your values even when it's difficult? I think weak men follow the crowd, and that seems to be the in thing to do this day, right? Like you said, hey, pick a popular whatever fad and jump on that train. But I see a strong man's role as leading with integrity and his actions defined by his character. In other words, who that man is when no one's watching. So that moral strength of having, and that moral strength implies that you have a belief code, right? That you believe in something strongly and that you stand up for that, even when it's not easy, even when it's not popular. And this is where I really see men slipping today, and culture in general really is pulling back from moral strength. Oh, I don't. You can't say that. That's not PC. That's not politically correct. Or we have this cancel culture and all of that, where people who have strong moral values seems like they're less welcome to express those values. And I believe that a part of being masculine, a part of being man in this day and age, is owning that moral strength. Is that fair? Do you see that in culture where that's kind of being tamped down in this day and age?
Yeah, it's easy to take advantage for something to get a quick win as opposed to investing in something and going for the long haul.
Right.
It's one thing I enjoyed about working with you is that you don't take the fast dollar. Honestly, you could take a lot of clients and sell them a dream and take their money. But I've seen it time and time again where you don't. And I've seen time and time again where you give money back for people that just aren't invested in it. And
A good fit for whatever reason.
Good fit
right.
for the program.
Yeah.
And that speaks volumes of the type of person that you are. And I see that, you do see that over and over again. And when you do see it, it does stand out. Well, unfortunately, it does stand out, right? Because it's odd now,
I think it does.
right? Because
Yeah.
now you just see
Yeah.
all these sharks and charlatans all over the place, you know, going
Yeah.
for the, I just
Yeah.
want the Rolex, I just want this, I just want the show. And there's no care or compassion or, like you said, what I love is now everybody has a, what are you going to call it? Like, you know, company culture type of thing. You know, we stand for integrity. And the police department's crazy for doing this. We put it on top of side of our car, but do we really live that, or are we just putting it on there just to show? You know, and I find that more and more. You see that it's like I brand myself as that, but I've never shown it. So I feel like you don't need that written on your T-shirt, right, Kevin? Like you live it every
Yeah.
day.
Nope.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Don't need it written on my
No.
T-shirt. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the world, that's a really good point. I think the world needs more examples of strong moral strength, of men who are unafraid of stepping up, speaking out. And there are examples of that, but like you said, it seems almost like it's almost an exception. It should be the rule. It shouldn't be the exception. When somebody acts with moral integrity and moral strength, that should be the norm. But it's, again, with political and cultural whims being what they are, it seems like it's easier sometimes for dudes just to shut down, to shut up, and to play small instead of standing up,
Yeah.
to have a set of morals and to stand up for them. So that's the moral strength piece. And then wrapping this whole thing up, this is obviously near and dear to my heart, but spiritual strength. I think this one gets missed a little bit. And some people might lump this in with moral strength. I see this as something different. It's not necessarily about religion, but it's about having this purpose, this guiding mission, this belief in something bigger than yourself. This, why am I here? Knowing, why do I wake up every morning? What's driving me? And I think that strong men seek something bigger than themselves, or they should seek something bigger than themselves, their faith, their legacy, their impact. And I think we're hardwired to worship as well. I really do. I think that if we're not worshiping, I'm as a devout Christian, I would say if we're not worshiping God, we are worshiping worldly things. And that's usually going to be things like money or power or fame or my place in this world, right? And while there's nothing wrong with money, there's nothing wrong with power, there's not even anything wrong with fame, when we worship those, when that's what we worship at the altar of, I think we're losing that spiritual strength. But having this mission, knowing why you are here, and being unafraid of stepping into the fullness of who you were created to be, that spiritual weakness. And I think the opposite of that, of just, I have a purpose. I know why I'm here. I've done the work to discover that. And now it is beholden upon me to go out and to share that with the world. That's the spiritual strength. And again, I see it sorely, sorely lacking in our culture overall, but I see it really lacking in a lot of men as well. More so probably younger men. I think that older men do a better job here in general than the younger generation. But this is an area I'm heavily invested in myself, and just trying to strengthen my spiritual practice and my walk with God. So I don't know where you fall on that spectrum, Russell, but again, just having that purpose, that guiding mission. You had mentioned earlier, hey, I've spent a lifetime as a first responder, and here I am. I wanted to help people, and I just felt like I wasn't in that role, and now I am. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, right? When I say spiritual strength, and walking that out. And I don't know if you see that in the world around you, a lack of spiritual strength, or not so much.
I have been noticing younger generation seems to be getting back into the church from what I've been seeing around.
Love it.
Yeah. And I'm like wondering why this switch is happening. But I always think of, again, it goes back to appreciation of what you have and what's going on around you. And I don't know if I told you, but I've stopped watching the news probably about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's made
Same. Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen the news.
Tremendous difference in my
impact.
life. And I've also switched my social media to be more positive,
Right.
and I just look for the more positive messages. Right. And it just helps me out every day. And just seeing the beauty in the world and the good people in the world, because as a cop, that's all I saw was bad. And it really, really made a big difference in my life as far as like my mood and my health. So No, I agree. Whatever you find spiritually and whatever you find to, help you grow as a person is most important, and not necessarily in the bank account, right? That I think you there was probably one year where you made a killing, and I don't know about you, but that year I did that, I was never more miserable in my life. And
Yeah.
I would remember back
Same.
to when I was 20 and had $15 in my pocket, and I was the happiest person I've ever been. And I'm like,
Sure.
how is this so drastically different? So
Yeah.
you have to find that.
Yeah.
That it's not money. It's not
Right on.
possessions, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. Spot on, man. Spot on. So here's what I'll say. Just like as we're wrapping this up, just like with physical strength, it makes sense that we need to work out in order to get physically strong. Russell, you had mentioned, hey, we need a plan. We need progressive overload, and we've got to have the appropriate dose of things. Well, I think that same is true for our mental strength, our emotional strength, our moral strength, our spiritual strength. These are muscles that we need to, if we don't work them, if we don't have a plan, if we don't invest in those things, they're going to atrophy. Just like an older person's going to have sarcopenia, right? That age-related muscle loss, which we're going to talk about that in future episodes as well. But your muscles are going to shrink if you don't use them. It's a use it or lose it kind of situation. So, man, what I want to leave you with here today is to think about the 5 pillars of strength and give yourself a self-assessment. No judgment here, right? Just honestly assess where you are. Maybe a scale of 1 to 10 on each of those. Which one of those pillars do you feel like you struggle with the most? Which ones are you the strongest in? What action steps are you going to take this week to strengthen one of those weak areas? That's my encouragement for you, that you do a little self-reflection, again, without judgment. This isn't saying anything good or bad. It's just, hey, I'm a dude. I'm taking radical responsibility for myself and for my strength, my holistic strength. Where could I use some help? And let us know. I'd love to hear from you. All right. Well, Russell, I think we're just going to leave it there. Appreciate you hopping on here, buddy. Next week, let's talk a little bit about strength training. I think that's where we just actual getting in the gym, getting it done. Let's give some dudes some actual tips on how to get strong.
Awesome. Love it. Bye, guys.
Okay, men, that's our show for this week. Don't forget to download our free guide titled How to Raise Your Testosterone Naturally. You can find the download link in the show notes for this episode on whatever app you're listening to this podcast on. If you've enjoyed today's show, here are 3 ways you can support us. Number 1, share this episode with a friend. Number 2, make sure to like and follow this show, and please consider leaving us a 5-star review. Number 3, give us a follow over at Instagram. We're at Alpha Edge Army. So that's Alpha Edge Army all run together. I really appreciate you men taking the time to listen. And until next week, stay strong.